Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 201 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to look at the important topic of honesty and how to bring more of it to your leadership. Now you might be thinking, but I am honest and that's why I'm a thoughtful leader. But we often find ourselves in situations where we feel like we're not being as honest as we could be, and that's what I've found in my career as well. So let's get into this important topic right now. Now, most of us appreciate honesty, which is why honest leadership is in such high demand. There's some recent research by Professors Kouzes and Posner in the book The Leadership Challenge, which shows that honesty is the most sought after leadership quality, and their research has been repeated across multiple countries over several decades, and honesty has always been in the top 4 leadership characteristics in their research, with the most recent study being completed in 2017, which is fairly recent in terms of leadership research, but obviously it predates things like the pandemic and all these sorts of things. In this episode, I'm going to take a look at honest leadership, why it matters, and how we can be honest a little more often than maybe we are right now. So most of the thoughtful leaders I speak to would probably say they're quite honest in their leadership, but I don't think we're being as honest as we could be. When I run leadership training, I like to run polls with the leaders in the room to see if I can uncover some of the trends out in the workplace. Now, the types of things I'm interested in are why leaders struggle to have difficult conversations and what sometimes stops leaders from doing the good leadership things they know they want to be doing. Now, these polls are not scientific, of course, but I find that what the leaders tell me is consistent with what I'm seeing in workplaces and through the experiences of my coaching clients. Here's some of the things I've learned from my training cohorts recently. One of them is that the top things that these leaders were worried about when having a difficult conversation was upsetting the other person and dealing with the other person's emotions. Second, I learned that feeling anxious was by far and away the most prominent emotion felt by leaders who had to tackle a difficult conversation with a team member. And third, the most common time management challenges faced by these leaders was being interrupted by other people and struggling to say no. Now, one of the things I notice about these points is that these leaders are experiencing significant stress related to safeguarding other people's feelings. They don't like saying no, they tolerate interruptions for fear of being seen as rude, and they feel anxious when faced with difficult situations. Now, this is not to say that these leaders are weak or submissive or poor leaders. In my view, it's more that the natural need for approval, to get along with people, and feel accepted as part of a group is coming out strongly and raising the stress levels for these leaders. Now, all of the anxiety and feelings of needing to be liked or accepted are quite natural, but sometimes we need to resist them in order to lead effectively and be more honest in leadership. I ran a recent training session to help leaders develop better coaching skills, and one of the activities had a scenario where a team member had bad body odor. The exercise was a questioning skills role play where the leader had to ask questions to uncover more of the context behind the issue. Now, instead of starting with something like, I've noticed that sometimes you have bad body odor at work, are you aware of this issue? Every group asked questions to try to get the person to discover for themselves they had bad body odor without telling them directly. Now, I realize that body odor conversations are actually very personal and can be extremely tough, and I've had to have these conversations myself in the past, but I was surprised at people's natural tendency to avoid broaching the topic directly and to dance around it instead. It was more surprising because this was only a role play and it wasn't even a real situation. So if you ask most people in the street, they'd probably tell you that, of course, we want more honest leaders. So why then do we still see toxic workplaces, bad behaviour, political manoeuvring, if everyone knows we should be more honest and open? Now, I'm not saying that a lack of honesty is the reason behind all leadership problems, but I believe it has a significant role to play. And I don't believe that leaders are going around telling outright lies either. But I do believe that avoidance is a very common form of dishonesty. And this avoidance can come in several forms. The first might be withholding information. we hold back what we really need to say to spare someone's feelings. Or we might soften our message. We might water down our words or use false praise to make sure we don't offend someone or come across as critical. Or we might not take action. We might put off a difficult conversation or put off delivering an unpleasant message, and sometimes we might hope that the problem will go away by itself. Now, you might have noticed some of these creeping into your leadership from time to time. And I know I certainly have fallen prey to these, or at least felt tempted to avoid unpleasantness in certain situations. And if you haven't yet, I'd recommend you go back and listen to number 175 of this podcast, which is all about avoiding conflict. That is a good one to check out. I'll put a link in the show notes page, thoughtleader.com/201. So the research tells us that honesty is one of the most valued leadership characteristics. So it stands to reason that we should be attempting to be more honest. In general, I find that people appreciate an honest leader, even if it means they need to hear a harsh truth. So here are some ways I think we can try to be more honest in leadership to build trust with our people. The first thing I suggest is to think of the positive outcome you want for the other person. Now, sometimes we become trapped in our own minds. We think about what we're trying to gain or the impact of the situation on us. However, if you need to deliver a difficult message in an honest and open way, it's useful to think of the positive outcome you would like for the other person. This can make difficult conversations easier because you feel better if you believe you're actually trying to help the other person in some way. For example, if somebody is lacking motivation, you may want them to feel more motivated and enjoy coming to work as a result of a challenging conversation you're about to have. It's not all about you wanting them to be more motivated. Instead, it's about them being able to enjoy their work more rather than struggling through each day. Now, this type of reframing may seem like a mental trick, but ultimately, most thoughtful leaders like to help people. So reframing your intent in this way can make you feel like you're really helping, even if it may seem like you're going to make people uncomfortable in the short term. And this means you can be more honest, and by being honest, you're actually being helpful. The second thing I'd suggest is to focus on the long game, and unfortunately many of our workplaces are focused on short-term outcomes. Monthly reporting or quarterly sales targets have us looking only a short distance into the future. And it's common for leaders to be pushed to deliver results quickly so that the latest figures look good. But in reality, whether a client signs up with us on June 30th or July 2nd doesn't actually make a whole lot of difference in terms of the outcome for the client. But in our reporting, the company will show greater revenue in the current financial year, which makes the senior management team look good right now. And individually, we tend to do this too. We focus on looking forward to the weekend and worrying about it next week. Our brains are constantly battling between seeking short-term gratification and focusing on long-term goals, according to research from Princeton University. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes page as well. And this can lead us to take the easy short-term option because it feels better at the time. However, focusing on long-term potential pain can be beneficial. So let's say a team member is behaving badly, disrupting your team. At the moment, it's just an annoying thing for other team members to deal with, but there's no major crisis just yet. But if you avoid tackling the problem early, you're likely to see bigger problems later on. Other team members losing motivation and respect for your leadership, for example. To help you take action earlier, focus on the potential problems that may occur later down the track. When you tackle a problem early, it's actually likely to be an easier conversation because you can stop it before it gets out of control. Now, when it's left to fester though, it could result in a big problem, potentially needing HR support and formal performance management or other team members quitting. Now, this is unpleasant for everyone and a whole lot more effort for you and for HR. In addition, if you let a problem fester like that, it becomes harder to say something because you've already let it go for so long. People start to go, well, why didn't you tell me that before? So focus on the potential longer term issues that may happen, and this can help you to demonstrate more honest leadership right now. And there's a related article on the show notes page as well about how short-term thinking leads to bad leadership, so check that one out too. Another thing you can do is to choose different words. Many people have become accustomed to telling white lies or lies that are designed to spare someone's feelings. And often this can cause greater problems in the long run, especially if people find out you weren't being honest with them. Now, something I learned from neuroscientist and philosopher Sam Harris in a podcast recently was that you can change the words you use to be more honest without actually needing to be brutally direct. So for example, let's say you know some information but you don't think it's appropriate to share with your team. Now instead of saying I don't know or I can't tell you, you could say something like I don't think it's appropriate to share that information with the team right now. Now the result is the same, you aren't sharing the information, but the difference is that you're being honest in the second statement but not in the first one. Now it may sound like a trivial difference, but even this degree of honest leadership can help to build trust with a team and help you maintain your integrity at the same time. Now it's interesting, do you notice any situations in your leadership where you could make a similar change to the words that you use? And the last thing I'd suggest to be more honest is to take the time for self-reflection. If you want to demonstrate more honest leadership, it's important to be aware of your behavior. And one of the ways we can do this is to take time to reflect on what has happened during our day or during our week. You can start to take note of times when you may have watered down your language to make a message easier for people to receive. Maybe you have avoided a hard conversation, or you have told a lie to avoid upsetting people. And of course, it's also good to reflect on the times when you were honest and open. When you've noticed the times when you were and weren't as honest as you could be, you can start to look a little deeper. You could ask yourself, what was it about the situation that made you lie, avoid, or dilute your message? How could you deal with that next time? How could you do better? And even the situations where you were very honest, what made you feel more comfortable being honest in that situation? And can you bring that to the next situation too? And over time, you'll come to notice when you're potentially being less honest than you could be, which can help you to change your approach. Now, it's important to remember that the research of Kouzes and Posner is quite clear. Honesty is one of the most highly valued leadership qualities. That means that people are looking for it in their leaders. So even though honesty might feel uncomfortable and daunting, it's what many people are actually looking for. This doesn't mean you need to be barbaric and overly direct. You can be honest and still be respectful. Now, the people who say I'm just being honest as an excuse to be rude or insulting have not got it right. But hopefully, knowing that people want honest leadership will help you to feel more comfortable opening up and giving to them more often. I'm interested in your thoughts on this one. Do you struggle being open and honest with your team? And what could you do to potentially demonstrate more honest leadership? I'm interested in your comments on this one. To leave them, you can go to the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/201. And let me and all the thoughtful leaders out there know what your experience with honest leadership is. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you taking the time and hopefully you find it helpful. If you do find it helpful, it would be great if you could take a few minutes to leave a positive review on your podcast player of choice. And I'll leave a link to be able to do that in the show notes page as well. So thank you in advance. And of course, as usual, keep up the thoughtful leadership, take care of yourselves and your people, and I'll be back next week.